And once again, I would remind members that we will have topical questions first, which will last for 15 minutes, and then we will move to deal with the questions that appear on the order paper. I also would like to take this opportunity to welcome the new Minister of Finance and Personnel to his first question time, and I wish him well. And I call Mr. George Robertson. Mr. Robertson.
Mr. Speaker, could I wish my colleague, the new Finance Minister, well, and feel privileged, as I am the first member to be asking him a question in his new post. And now to my question. The Minister has publicly expressed his belief that Northern Ireland is in the foothills of economic recovery. And what do you base this judgment, Minister?
Mr. Speaker, can I begin by thanking you for your words of welcome? Can I thank my good friend Mr. Robinson for also his kind words? I have found in the last 6 weeks, I have to say, a lot of kind words that suddenly seem to be everybody's best friend. It'll not last. It'll not last. It's early days. The honeymoon's still going on. Can I say in response to thank the Minister or the member for his question? I don't think any of us should get unduly optimistic too early, because we've seen in the past where politicians have expressed too early the end of economic downturns and recessions and so forth. So I think we need to be somewhat cautious. But where you do start to see a body of evidence develop, such as we have had over the last number of weeks, I think there is encouraging signs at the moment economically in Northern Ireland. There are at least 5 indicators which I think are starting to show that we are moving into the foothills of economic recovery in Northern Ireland. The first is the Northern Ireland Composite Index, which is produced by NISRA in my own department, which has shown positive growth in the economy during 2 of the last 4 quarters. Our unemployment rate in Northern Ireland now seems to have stabilised and has turned the corner. It now stands at 6.9%, placing it nearly a whole percentage point below the UK average. Our employment levels, as well as unemployment, are heading in the right direction. Employment has risen by 3,240 jobs over the last quarter and by 5,230 over the past year. The Ulster Bank's Purchasing Managers Index, Mr. Speaker, in July and in August was extremely encouraging, and anybody who knows the history of that will know that the figures have been littered with positives, to use a direct quote from the commentators. Business activity, new orders, exports and employment have all increased. Business activity increases now at its fastest rate in 70 months. And then the final indicator is that the Residential Property Price Index report shows that between the first and second quarters of 2013, prices increased by 2%. And in many respects, Mr. Speaker, these are the best figures since 2007. That's significant, because that was the start of the downturn. All the previous indications were that these things were moving in the wrong direction. They're now moving in the right direction. I think that is rightly cause for optimism.
I also announce that question number 6 has been withdrawn. George Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for his answer. Could I ask the Minister, what evidence do you have that these improvements will be sustained to help minimise situations such as that pertaining to the possible closure of the Hanna Browne stores in Limavady, Bangor and Lisburn?
Yeah, I thank the member for his supplementary, and he's right, I think, to highlight particularly the case of Hanna Browne, which I know is in his own constituency. They have a presence on the High Street in Newtownards in my own constituency as well. And again, I think that shows the extent of the problem we have, and I don't think we should be overly optimistic or unnecessarily optimistic, perhaps. There will be bumps along the road to recovery. This is not going to be a switch from all negative news to very suddenly positive news. There are going to be maybe 2 steps forward and 1 back economically in Northern Ireland. We're going to see, unfortunately, I suspect, well-known names such as the likes of Hanna and Browne fall away and not survive. I think what we have done as an executive, though, particularly in terms of rates taken forward by my predecessors in this role, have ensured that many shops and many of those in retail are still there and have fought through the downturn and are in a position where they can survive it. I think that the job for me and the job for colleagues in the executive now is how we can encourage such companies, such firms to thrive moving forward. I am optimistic because the evidence is all moving in the right direction. It is starting to show trends over a period of a couple of months or a couple of quarters, and that's always good. And I think that the the growth in some of our key markets. We're seeing growth in the UK economy as a whole. We're seeing growth in the Irish economy. We're seeing growth in the Eurozone economy. And given how dependent we have been in the past on exporting goods from Northern Ireland into those markets, the fact that they are all showing positive signs, I think, is an encouragement that the indicators that we've seen over the last number of weeks are here to stay, and that does give me the optimism that I have expressed previously.
Paul Girvan. Mr. Girvan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I too would like to congratulate the Minister on taking the post, and hope it isn't a bumpy road for him. Minister, you'd be aware of the sense of injustice felt by the staff employed by the PSNI and some by DOJ, who are not entitled to access to the equal pay settlement. And I was just wondering, Minister, have you given any consideration to this, and just since you've taken up post?
I thank the member, Deputy Speaker, or Mr. Speaker, for his question. I think it's important to make clear at the outset that the case that was taken, which was a judgment from Justice Babington back in March, made clear that there was no legal liability for my department in terms of settling any issue of equal pay for the staff that he mentions in both the PSNI and the former NIO. Although there is, some would argue, and I would have incredible sympathy for the strong moral case and the strength of feeling that there is across many who are literally sitting beside some who did access, doing essentially the same work, who were able to access the equal pay settlement, and they themselves weren't to. I've spoken to many colleagues over the last couple of weeks, notably the First Minister and himself and Mr McRae, who's sitting to his left, and indeed many others within the Assembly who have expressed their concerns and the strong sense of feeling that they have that there is a moral case for us to perhaps address. I'm conscious, though, of unnecessarily raising expectations, because there are a lot of people here who have been let down in the past. I don't want to be in any way raising their expectations that this can be resolved, but I do want to make it clear that I am currently carefully considering options in respect of this issue. I have asked officials to prepare a paper on how a payment could be made, on how much such a payment could be made, and what the ramifications might be. I am mindful too that I may require, in order to make that all a reality, I may require broader political support within the Executive and indeed within the Assembly. There are issues and there are challenges with this, but I am carefully considering the matter, and I hope that what I've said today might give some comfort, Mr Speaker, to those in the PSNI and the NIO that their case is being taken seriously.
Thank the Minister for his answer, and appreciate that there is a moral issue, and I believe that we should be addressing that. The Minister has mentioned the possible need for broader political support. Does the Minister envisage this being a problem, or have there been those who have been trying to stymie getting a solution to this matter?
Well, thank the member for his supplementary. I hope that there won't be difficulties if required. I think it will be required to get broader political support. And the reason I don't think that there will be difficulties, Mr Speaker, is because of the sheer volume of representations that I have received, not just from members of our public service who themselves are directly affected, but also by political representatives from this chamber and indeed in other democratic institutions. The Committee for Finance and Personnel has taken a keen interest in this issue, and I think in the past made it clear that some way should be found to resolve this issue, and obviously that committee has a broad political representation from this House, and there was Assembly support in broad principles for a resolution of it from a motion that was brought forward by Mr McRae, I think back in June of this year, and that was roundly endorsed by members from all sides. So in that respect, I hope that is followed through at a later stage. If I require, if I am able to do this, if there is the money to do it, and I require political support, then I hope that stands us in good stead. But I do want to reiterate, Mr Speaker, that I don't want to unnecessarily raise expectations other than to say that the issue is being carefully considered. And if I can come to a view that this can be done and that it is affordable and that the ramifications aren't so bad that they would rule it out, then I will be seeking that broader support to resolve this issue and to dispense with a sense of injustice that many within our public service feel.
Adrian McQuillan. Mr McQuillan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Could I also add my best wishes to the Minister? and also to his predecessor. Could I ask the Minister to update the Assembly on his public sector reform agenda and the creation of a new division within DFP?
Thank the member for his congratulations and his question. Maybe a sort of fairly big Christmas card list this year. I think there are lots of priorities that I would have in DFP, and I think you would expect that in a department that is so central, that is so pivotal, and that does have such a broad remit right across our government. So I think you would expect me, as you would expect any finance minister, any person who occupied this role, to be first and foremost concerned with ensuring that our public finances are sound and are secure, and that we are able to do our first priority as a government, which is to deliver services to achieve better outcomes for our citizens. But I obviously have priorities in respect of procurement, making sure that we spend that wisely, and the £3 billion that we spend every year, we spend that wisely, and we do, in so doing, do what we can to assist local companies. You would expect me to have priorities in respect of rates as well. But to that list I have added public sector reform, and the reason I have done that is because I believe that the public sector, or the public expenditure situation in Northern Ireland, is challenging, remains challenging. It hasn't perhaps been as challenging as it has been for some across the water, principally in local government. But there is less spending moving forward. There's less spending overall. There will be less resource expenditure, which will put pressure on some of our key services. And then if you add into that the rising public expectations of what we in Stormont, what we in government can do and should deliver for them, then that poses an immense challenge for all of us moving forward. Government needs to transform, needs to change, needs to be innovative, is the conclusion that I have come to. To assist me in achieving that objective, I have, as the member alluded to, created a new public sector reform division within the department. It will be headed up by Colin Sullivan, who has been appointed in the last week or so. And in the weeks ahead, he and I will start to work up a work programme which will look at how can we drive innovation across the public sector, how can we make better use of technology, how can we collaborate across different departments to resolve outstanding problems, how can we spend a lot more on prevention, and how can we ensure excellence right across the board. It is a big task, Mr Speaker, but it is one, given the circumstances that we are in, that has to be embraced.
Adrian McQuillan. Mr. McQuillan.
Thanks, Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for his answer there? And during the course of his answer there, he mentioned the new division within the DFP. Who does he see the main players in that, or along with himself and the gentleman he mentioned?
Well, I thank the member for a supplementary question. Well, obviously, I will take this is a priority that I have made. I will take a very, very close personal interest in this subject matter. I think the significance of this issue moving forward for the Northern Ireland Government has been highlighted by the fact that we have created a division and that we have put a senior civil servant in charge of that. He will have a small team that will work around him. But in many respects, I can't do the job that I want to do in respect to public sector reform unless I get engagement from right across the public sector. And I do mean right across the public sector. It's not just the other 11 departments here at Stormont, although obviously they will be critical. I want to be see DFP as a proactive partner alongside those departments, because I think all departments understand that they are under pressure, understand that public expenditure is tight, understand that if they are to meet the expectations that the public have for them individually as departments, then they are going to have to reform, they are going to have to change, they are going to have to be much more innovative in how they deliver public services. So I don't see it as DFP stepping in, Mr Speaker, and telling these departments and telling others within the public service beyond our core departments here what they should be doing and when they should be doing it and how they should be doing it. I might like to do that. I might have my own ideas how that could be done, but I see it very much as working in partnership with others within the public sector to tackle that reality that we have of less public expenditure, different public expenditure moving forward, and also the expectations that people have about what we should be doing. Because I'm sure the member will sympathise that public expectations, even in the circumstances we are with public expenditure, aren't diminishing. In fact, if anything, they are rising all the time. And that poses a real difficulty for departments. They are not used sometimes to thinking about reform and innovation and collaborating across different departments. I see DFP as an enabler, as somebody who can facilitate that sort of reform, as somebody who can be a catalyst for that sort of change that I think the whole of government in Northern Ireland so desperately needs.
Order, members. We now move to all questions to the Minister of Finance and Personnel, and I call Rosaleen McCurley.
Question 1, please.
As a member may be aware, the Office for National Statistics has been leading a programme for the United Kingdom which aims to develop an accepted and trusted set of national statistics to help people understand and monitor national well-being. That work has been undertaken for the UK as a whole, and officials in NISRA have been involved at all stages in seeking to ensure that Northern Ireland interests are represented and that Northern Ireland data is included where available. The area of wellbeing measurement has grown internationally in recent years in response to a general understanding that traditional economic measures, particularly a focus on GDP, are and remain very valuable, but that they do not provide a complete picture of social, economic and environmental progress. I, along with the Members' Party colleague, the Chair of the Finance and Personnel Committee, Daithí Mackay, opened a Belfast conference on this subject just last week. It was organised by the Carnegie UK Trust. That conference was very well attended, with participants from a broad spectrum of public life in Northern Ireland. Following on from that conference, I have asked NISRA officials to draw together the Northern Ireland data which has been input to the UK Measuring National Wellbeing Wheel of Measures, so that we can have our own Northern Ireland index and also a comparator with the UK as a whole.
I also want to say that questions number 5, 7 and 14 have all been withdrawn. Rosalind McQuillan.
Agus an diglom an seansa glacu inis a chugarjas a ggóil leis an aire asa fós nua agus géim gachráar sa námatala teacht. Can I just take this opportunity to congratulate the Minister on his appointment and to wish him well in the future? As the Minister said, GDP and GVA are provide statistics that are used as indicators, but they can sometimes be crude indicators of how well a society is performing. And will the Minister agree that the narrative needs to be widened, and will this debate be brought to the Executive? And in that regard, would the Minister consider reflecting particularly on the experience of Scotland and how well they have done in regard to how they've addressed wellbeing?
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for supplementary. I thank her as well for her congratulations. It's coming from all sides. I'm deeply worried now about this. The member is right. I mean, this is actually a fascinating. It's probably not what people out there would think is a core area of business for the Department of Finance and Personnel. And we have, I think, been conditioned down through the years to think exclusively about measuring the success of one country or one region versus another on the basis of your economic output. So GDP, or in our case, given the difficulty sometimes in accurately giving that for Northern Ireland, GVA is frequently used. And the school of thought is that whilst they are very useful, and I think we should always continue to produce those figures, I think those statistics still have merit because it is an easier comparator sometimes than using well-being or happiness or whatever is the preferred approach. I think there is merit in us examining the potential of broadening how we measure our success or otherwise as a government by examining well-being. So the commitment has been made by my predecessor, and I will continue that forward, that we will work with the Statistics Office across in the wider United Kingdom to ensure that whatever input we can have, whatever data we have the input, we will input that data, and that we will produce that data then ourselves for Northern Ireland. I think that's a significant step forward, that for the first time we will have wellbeing data published for Northern Ireland. What we do with that moving forward, I think is something that I have to carefully consider, Mr. Speaker, because this is an area that is still very much in its infancy. I think it has huge potential. I think in some respects it's quite exciting what's going on. But I'm conscious that I don't want to go too far ahead of international best practice in respect of this. So it is an area that I'm open to looking at without ditching, although in fact actually being complementary to the fact that GDP and GVA still are an important measure of where we are as a country.
Trevor Clark. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I join the rest of the choir, and congratulations for the Minister today. Can I ask the Minister, and I see the enthusiasm in terms of the wellbeing measurement, but can the Minister go any further if he has any plans to actually bring it to the Executive to make it actually part of the programme for government?
I thank the member too for his congratulations. If there is anybody who now rises to their feet and doesn't congratulate me, they will be singled out for special treatment. Yeah, that would be. That's our very own indicators of national well-being and happiness sitting over in the corner. I'm sure they will. Let me touch on the point that the members made. In fact, I didn't address this in the member opposite supplementary about what I might propose to do in respect of Northern Ireland and what lessons I might learn from elsewhere. At last week's conference in Belfast on the subject of well-being, I had the opportunity to meet with Sir John Elvidge, who is a former Permanent Secretary in the Scottish Government, and we had a very interesting discussion about how their framework, which is called Scotland Performs, has actually been incorporated as a strategic measurement framework throughout the Scottish public sector. And I think there is considerable merit, Mr. Speaker, in at least examining how such an approach could be used to help us assess and measure how we are making Northern Ireland a more successful country. If you look at places like Finland and Sweden, they're already learning from Scotland and what they're doing. So I'm actually looking forward to meeting with Sir John again, and perhaps with some, although he's retired now from his position, others within the senior civil service within Scotland. I'm due to visit meet my counterpart John Swinney in the next number of weeks, and I may be able to, and I hope actually to be able to meet with those who are in the Scottish Government who operate Scotland Performs to see how they incorporate it into their measurement of their success of their programme for government and how we might be able to do the same.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answers thus far. And I suppose I should congratulate him as well. That maybe didn't sound very sincere. I did obviously mean that. The Minister may be aware that the UN Global Report on Happiness was published last week, and I'm just wondering, given how miserable many of us are up here a lot of the time, is there anything that we can learn from countries such as Denmark, who ranked in the top 10?
Yes, I thank the member for her question and for congratulations as well. There is a bit of some of the purists who look at this would debate whether well-being and happiness are exactly the same sort of thing. There is slight and distinct differences. I'm not going to get into that sort of academic debate, but I think the fact that the United Nations are producing this index, this happiness index, on an annual basis shows that this is where, on a global basis, a lot of countries are moving towards, not just simply assessing on pure economic figures, but also doing it on the basis of wider social, environmental and economic well-being and happiness. And I was interested by, and I did see the report, I was interested by the countries that did rank in the top 5, which included at the top Denmark, I think Sweden were in there at 5th or something like that, and Norway was 2nd. And whenever you look at it superficially, you think these are cold countries, they're dark for half the year, they pay about half of their income in taxes. You wouldn't think that's a natural recipe for a happy country, although Mr Campbell reminds me that Norway is outside of the European Union, which might be one of the reasons, and it has oil and gas surpluses that it doesn't know what to do with. That may be a slightly different case altogether, but I think that the fact that these countries are ranking there, even though they do have big governments, and this is one of the things that I'm quite keen to look at in respect to public sector reform, that having a big government like Northern Ireland has, like Denmark has, like Sweden has, isn't necessarily always a bad thing if that big government is focused on being efficient and is focused on being effective. So I've already expressed my desire to look at and learn lessons from the likes of Denmark, from Sweden, from Finland, who also rank very highly, compared to Ireland, which was at, I think, 17th, and the United Kingdom, which was at 22nd. So I'm keen to learn those lessons in terms of how we can get a competitive economy, how we can get a more efficient public sector, and how we can also make our people happier in the process.
Colin McKevitt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Question 2.
Thank the member for a question. On the 28th of May 2013, my predecessor, Minister Wilson, announced DFP approval for considerable financial support for the Interreg 4A Narrow Water Bridge project. In this announcement, in the letter of offer issued to the project lead partner and in all subsequent correspondence to those involved with our lobbying for the project, it has been made clear that the Department has a fixed funding position for the Narrow Water Bridge. The substantial Interreg 4A funding package, which is some £11.7 million, is the DFP contribution to the project. My department has no additional funding that can be made available for the Narrow Water Bridge.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And the Minister is probably aware that discussions are ongoing to put together a cocktail of funding to deliver this project, which many see in Southdown as a means of underpinning our local economy. Would the Minister give a positive contribution to exploring the possibilities of the Northern Ireland Executive making a financial contribution to make this very important project happen?
I thank the member for a supplementary. As I pointed out in my response to your first question, we have already committed a substantial amount of money, some nearly £12 million to this project, which is a considerable volume of money in the grand scheme of the project. Would have been a very significant amount of money, but for the huge cost overrun. And I recognise that, and indeed the business case recognised that there was a myriad of potential benefits for the sort of greater Carlingford Lough area, particularly on tourism and ease of access and quicker transportation times. And whilst those are important things, I think, to secure for that area, and I know the area very well, we can't lose sight of the fact that there has been a significant cost overrun, which has proven challenging to get this project realised. DFP at this stage has received no formal proposals confirming that there are additional sources of funding, such as those that the member has highlighted in her initial question, that are in place. And the project must present satisfactory evidence of funding to the Special EU Programmes Body for their consideration, and then onward transmission to DFP for review. And given that there has been considerable increase in project cost, DFP would need to fully assess the implications of this increase in approval would be required. I am, as always, on everything, more than prepared to listen to anybody that comes forward with any proposals how to get us out of this problem or any other problem, but to date we have not received anything formal from anybody.
John McAllister. Mr McAllister. Thank
you, Mr Speaker. And not to be outdone, could I too congratulate the Minister? And well, I think it's only fair, Mr Speaker, that I congratulate him today. I won't feel as bad then having to shout resign at him in the future. There's huge concern, Mr Speaker, about this bridge, and the Minister quite rightly highlighted how right up against the wire effectively the project is. Will he give an undertaking at least to facilitate putting pressure on other governments, whether the Irish Government, I know, are going to contribute something, Muir District Council? Will he use his office to try and almost consolidate that cocktail of funding that has been put in place to make sure that it falls within all the necessary regulations with the European funding?
Thank the member for his question. I'm glad to see him without his partner in crime. He's been let out on his own now after the summer, it would seem. I think that in terms of financial contribution from Northern Ireland, the £12 million that we are committed to giving to this project is a significant tranche of money. He mentioned the commitment of others. I'm aware of the local council in that part of the world has committed to making money publicly, although we haven't had any sort of formal discussions with them about that. He mentioned the Irish Government. I am not aware, although we have had some discussions with the Irish Government. We haven't had any formal approach from them suggesting that they are going to input additional money. I suppose what the FP does in terms of consolidating, to use his term, is that ultimately we are, as a department, going to assess a new business case in respect of this because of the significant cost overrun that there has been. So in that regard, I suppose we are consolidating things, but my position is the same as my predecessor's position on this. As far as Northern Ireland is concerned, the £12 million that we are putting forward is enough and no more.
Gregory Campbell. Mr Campbell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and could I congratulate the Minister on lasting 28 minutes before the use of the first resign in his career. But on a slightly longer timescale, Mr Speaker, the Minister indicated that his predecessor made the announcement 4 months ago regarding the project. If the project were not to proceed, can the Minister outline what the outcome would be in terms of the Interreg funding that has already been set aside for it?
Thank the member for his first question. And this is probably, given the amount of money that we have outlaid, or we have indicated that we would outlay on this project, this is perhaps my biggest concern, that here we have £12 million worth of money that we have committed, which, if this project doesn't go forward, we are going to have to find other projects to spend that money on, so that money isn't, which is European money, which of course is our own money coming back to us, isn't lost out in Northern Ireland, isn't the loser as a result. So, due to the substantial Interreg 4A funding currently allocated to the project, a decision needs to be taken in the coming weeks to ensure that if the project does not progress, a contingency may be put in place that is deliverable and will achieve full drawdown of the programme within the remaining timeframe, which ends in December 2015. So I think that highlights just the absolute urgency that there is in coming forward with this, and we can't mess about, I have to say, in trying to get a cocktail of funding which is loose and perhaps very difficult to realise ultimately. The DFP is currently working with the SEUPB, other departments in the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform in the Republic of Ireland to identify some contingency projects to meet the potential shortfall in the Interreg 4A programme allocation. The apportionment of departmental budgets in the Irish Republic means that any such projects must align with those priorities suitable for funding by the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport in the Republic of Ireland. So that also somewhat narrows our ability to spend this money and makes it even more of a concern for me moving forward.
Kieran McCarthy. Mr McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Question number 3 to the Minister.
I thank Mr McCarthy for his question. I have recently begun a series of meetings to renew the focus on the access to finance and banking issues. Last week I met with the Chief Executive of the British Bankers Association to discuss what more the banks can do to improve access to finance locally. I also met with the Secretary of State to discuss what action the Government will be taking to deliver on its commitments in this regard in the Economic Pact. In particular, I called on her to ensure that the first meeting of the Joint Ministerial Working Group on banking issues takes place as soon as possible. In the week prior to that, I met with the Irish Finance Minister to discuss the approach being taken to address the problems in the Irish banks and how this is being applied to the operations or their operations here in Northern Ireland. I will also be looking to meet with senior management of our individual banks, along with my party colleague and ministerial colleague, the Minister for Enterprise, in due course, and as part of our ongoing engagement with them.
Kieran McCarthy.
Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer. And could I, as a Strangford Assembly colleague, proudly congratulate the Minister on his appointment. Only somebody from Strangford could reach this point in your career, and so early. And I wish you every success in the future. I do hope that you will continue to make sensible and prudent decisions on behalf of us all. Following on from your response, Minister, do you share my concerns that the Government's funding for lending programme lets Northern Ireland down somewhat, in that there are very few UK domiciled banks here trading here? And what approach will you take with the Treasury to rectify that anomaly? Thank you.
Mr Speaker, I would let the member talk all day if that's a sort of effusive praise that he's going to throw in my direction. I'm sure that would be much like Mr McAllister will be short-lived in the future, but thank him anyway for his kind words. He is right in identifying the failure of many of the national lending initiatives brought forward by Treasury to function and operate properly here in Northern Ireland. I think the primary reason for that is our unique banking structure in Northern Ireland, where we have only one bank in British hands, that being RBS, Ulster Bank, who are in our national government's ownership. And because of that, then, they have habitually been the only bank who have actually embraced these national lending initiatives. The others aren't compelled to and have opted out of it. Sometimes they've opted out of it, I think, for very good reasons, because some of the schemes haven't been particularly tailored for Northern Ireland problems. They have been administratively bureaucratic and actually quite costly. So a lot of them have, and I've spoken to some of them who've said that it's simply not worth them spending the time or effort or money in some cases in getting into those schemes, because they're not going to work in Northern Ireland. Funding for lending, he mentioned specifically. I'm glad that Ulster Bank has embraced that. They are involved in that. The Bank of Ireland have now got on board as well in the last number of weeks. Banks which are certainly not small in a British sense, like Barclays and HSBC, are involved as part of their national banks. So they're very small operations in Northern Ireland, or at least availing of funding for lending. But in some ways, funding for lending is not where our problem is. Our problem is a property overhang problem. It's a bit more like the Irish Republic's problem than it is like the mainland UK's problem. And in terms of working with Treasury, in terms of working with our government in Westminster, I think the Joint Ministerial Working Group that I mentioned before will have as one of its specific pieces of work looking at how we can tailor those funds, those initiatives and those schemes so that they can work in Northern Ireland. And I welcome that engagement from government, and I welcome at last that recognition that we do need a different solution in Northern Ireland.
Dominic Bradley. Mr Bradley.
Cormaigad Concordia agus Tresliam a Capacan Lishanara agus Guillaume Gach Rahar Sanamata Rowing. I also congratulate the Minister on his appointment and wish him well in the future. But for the moment, could I ask him, can he give us an update on the enterprise finance guarantee? Thank you.
I thank the member for his comments as well, and I've been praised in every language going in this place. If only Jim Shannon were here, I could get it in Ulster Scots as well. The Enterprise Finance Guarantee Scheme is another one of those initiatives that Mr McCarthy was alluding to, which hasn't initially anyway worked in respect of Northern Ireland. There are, I think, as part of the Economic Pact, I understand an agreement to bring forward a pilot in respect of this issue. So, I hope that because it is one of these things. I think all of these schemes, whether they have worked in Northern Ireland or not, whether they have directly addressed the problems that we have in respect of banking and access to finance or not, do all have some merit and will help some companies and some firms in Northern Ireland get access to the finance that they need. Because I think this is, I've been on public record in saying this, I think that what threatens a recovery that I was talking to earlier in response to Mr Robinson is the failure of very good companies who have good ideas not being able to get access to finance. And if things like the Enterprise Finance Guarantee Scheme can help them, I think we should support and encourage that and work with our counterparts across the water to ensure that that pilot does work and is effective in Northern Ireland.
Megan Fearon.
And I would also like to congratulate the Minister on his appointment. And can I ask him if he will have discussions with the banking sector about the difficulties that businesses and actually local people face as well with cross-border banking?
I regularly, I've met with some of the main banks operating in Northern Ireland already. I imagine that in the weeks and months ahead that will only accelerate. Myself and my colleague, the Enterprise Minister, intend to continue on what my predecessor and her did in terms of meeting on a sort of quarterly basis with all of the main banks who operate in Northern Ireland. Clearly there is a cross-border element to banking, given that the Bank of Ireland and the Allied Irish Bank First Trust have a significant presence here in Northern Ireland. That means that I have to engage not only directly with them but also with my counterpart Michael Noonan, the Minister for Finance in the Irish Republic, and also NAMA as well, which obviously has a huge cross-border element and significance. So I'm very, very keen to do whatever I can, no matter who that is with, whether that's with our government in Westminster or the government in Dublin, to ensure that this very important issue, which is something that there is huge symmetries across the border on, is addressed. Because we need, whether it be in London or whether it be in Dublin, we need answers to the problem that help us and help companies and firms here in Northern Ireland to grow.
Mr Mitry.
Question number 4, Mr Speaker.
First of all, I welcome this further quarterly report from Land and Property Services in conjunction with Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency, which economic commentators are referring to as the most authoritative index for Northern Ireland. It is promising to note that this is the first quarter since 2007 that an increase in house prices across all property types has occurred. It confirms the views of local commentators that the residential property market here is beginning to stabilise. The index shows that the local market has rebalanced, with prices now at pre-2005 levels. The latest statistics include analysis of the 3-month period up to June 2013. The report shows that overall prices increased by 2% between the first and second quarters of this year. However, looking back over the last year, prices are still down by some 3% compared to the second quarter of 2012. The increased number of sales is another welcome sign of the market beginning to stabilise.
Mr Mitry.
Mr Speaker, like everyone else here today, I too congratulate the Minister and I thank him for the response that he has just given. The Minister will be aware that a number of residential property price indices have already exist, so why have DFP produced another one at this time?
I'm worried about all this praise, my head getting so big I'll not be able to get in through the door later on, but I'm sure somebody will bring me down to earth very quickly, I'm sure. Well, I think the merit in having this index is that, first and foremost, a reliable residential property price index, Mr Speaker, is very, very useful indicator of the state of the property market. The other indices which produce results for Northern Ireland are by their nature limited, in that they are based only on certain parts of the property market. So, for example, it's things like sales purchased through a mortgage, or it's based on averages or samples. The index produced by my department is based on the full range of sales of residential property in Northern Ireland, using transactions reported to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs for stamp duty land tax purposes. So you get a complete picture covering all sales, irrespective of how they were purchased. So it's all sales, and no matter how they're purchased, which is unlike some of the other indices. And this has then allowed LPS, in conjunction with NISR, to produce what economic commentators are referring to as the most authoritative index for Northern Ireland, and one that uses internationally recognised methodology.
Mr. Mackay.
I got a concour, and I know I'm at risk of making the Assembly sound like a broken Cliff Richard record, but can I also add my congratulations to the Minister, and I will congratulate him further once he gets through his first session with the Committee for Finance and Personnel in a couple of weeks. Can I say to the Minister, in terms of property sales, in terms of the construction industry, we still have a long way to go. And can I ask the Minister if he will commit to do what his predecessor failed to do, and that was to deal with the over-bureaucratic payments process between COPs and main contractors, and also will he introduce adequate protection for our subcontractors?
I think the member has. I thank the member for his praise. I look forward to my first session with the committee. I think it's scheduled for the 25th of this month, and I very much look forward to that. I'm sure they'll be as gentle with me there as they have been today. I think the member has conflated a couple of issues. I'll try to untangle them. I think that our situation in terms of where we are with house price sales, or house prices, I think we sometimes get a little bit obsessed with the price themselves. I would rather focus on, and the price is obviously of significance, particularly to people who have seen huge falls and are perhaps into negative equity. I'm probably more interested, particularly given the line that he was talking about getting the construction sector going, more interested in activity. Now, that activity, as you see from the index, is generally at a lower level within the market, but it has shown between Q1 and Q2 of this year a 10% increase, and that's a fairly significant increase, and the highest increase since Q2 of 2007, which was, of course, at the start of all of the economic problems that we've had. So I think that's a good indicator that we're heading in the right direction, but also that there are significant numbers. I think that was around 3,400 sales in Q2 of this year, which was not up to the sort of 2005 levels. In respect of COPES, which is a more sort of general issue on procurement right across the public sector, we have put in place, the member will know this from his experience in the committee, prompt payment criteria for all of our contracts. So we are paying, and most COPES, most departments are hitting well above their target area. Now they've moved, there's still room for improvement. We should always be striving to get as close to 100% as we can, but we have seen significant increases over the last number of years. And the member will also know that in terms of getting those payments down to subcontractors, we've introduced project bank accounts for any procurement contract over £1 million, which has a significant number of subcontractors involved in that they will have their payment go through a project bank account where officials from my department will have a say over that. And that should hopefully resolve the sort of situations that he would have seen in his own constituency with Pattens and the collapse of Pattens, and the failure then to have a significant number of subcontractors paid what they were owed.
Michael Copeland. Mr. Copeland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Minister, could I begin by offering you a degree of sympathy for the onerous duties that you now confront, and to a lesser degree echo the congratulations you've had from other quarters. Regarding the question, Minister, could I seek your views regarding how property prices are affected by geographical area, and the degree to which you believe rating valuations play a part in influencing house prices?
Well, clearly, where you live has an effect on the property price that you have, and we see that reflected in the latest index, Mr. Speaker, produced by Land and Property Services, where people in the index is split into four different areas across Northern Ireland. The north of Northern Ireland, which sort of stretches from, in respect of this index, from Londonderry right across through Limavady, Coleraine, the lovely north coast that my colleague here represents, showed a fairly significant increase. I think it was around 6% of a price increase. But you go into the other parts of it, where you go to Mr Mutree's constituency in Craigavon, that sort of south of Northern Ireland, still had a decrease. So there are parts of Northern Ireland that are doing better in terms of property prices than other, and that tends to reflect, I have to say, the data that comes from some of the other reports and indexes, and is reflective of historical trends in it. In respect of the impact that rates has on it, I suspect rates is, for some, maybe a factor that they consider whenever they're looking at the totality of the budget that they have to pay for their new property. But I haven't seen any documentary evidence to suggest that rates and the level of rates that people are paying is dissuading people from purchasing houses, or is in itself a factor in increasing or decreasing property prices.
Older members, that concludes questions to the Minister of Finance and